You've probably heard the line, just build more homes, dozens of times. But what actually drives or blocks the kind of development we need? And how do we think clearly when headlines, policy, and personal decisions all collide? To help us unpack that, I'm joined by Spencer Hurley, Regional Vice President at Trez Capital. Trez is one of North America's leading private real estate lenders. They've funded over $20 billion in loans across North America and specialize in financing residential, commercial, and mixed use developments. They've been doing this for over 25 years and have a real window into how housing actually gets built. Spencer works closely with advisors and investors across Ontario, helping connect capital with real world projects and helping us understand how to interpret the markets we live in, invest in, and care about. Spencer, welcome. Before we dive in, do you mind giving us a quick intro to yourself, your background, and a bit more about what Trez does from your view?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you having me here today. It's always fun to do one of these things. So as you mentioned, I am the regional vice president of capital raising at Trez Capital. So I work with advisors as well as investors, some family offices, institutions, things like that. And yeah, to your point, Trez has been around since 1997, and what our main background of our business is real estate development lending. So we lend to large developers throughout North America. We are a Canadian company. The company head office is in Vancouver, and we were started in Canada. And when it comes to Canada, I mean, there's nuances that we're going to get into, but we do a lot in Western Canada, BC and Alberta, and then a little bit in Ontario. Once again, that's a topic I think we're going to get to. And then in the US, we lend in states that have low to no state taxes. So if you think about those Sunbelt states, Texas, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Arizona, and we have offices throughout those states and actual boots on the ground. Our main focus for a long time has been residential development. We can, to your point, do anything, the office space, the retail space, currently not spaces that we're really participating in and haven't been for a long time, just because of the opportunities on the residential side.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you. And so really my first question to you is, everyone's saying just build more homes, but what's really going on underneath that?
Yeah, it's a nuanced question because I'm going to talk about Canada first because I think a lot of your clients and a lot of people watching this will be Canadians, and that's a big topic here. And we've had this shortage of housing in Canada. Well, how long have we been talking about the shortage of housing in Canada? I can't even remember when we weren't talking about it. And that was really caused by immigration, coupled with the inability to build quick enough. And that there's kind of four aspects to that. It's how long it takes to get things approved. There's the construction costs, which we've seen go up rather significantly. We had interest rate pressures for a little while. And then the last one, which kind of ties into the first one, is the zoning restrictions and red tape. So, throughout all of Canada, you've got different levels of government to go through in order to get things to go through. And in order to permit something to start building it in Canada, it can take 7-8 years to do that. And so, right now in Canada, we are about 3.5 million homes short of what we need by 2030, which is a pretty large number if you look at kind of the largest builders and what they built. So, it's a very high demand, and it's really the government red tape that's slowing it down.
And when you mention sort of government red tape, some of this is mostly, I think there's articles and stuff at a high level, but some of this stuff is invisible to the average person and to most people. Is there some of those that sort of stick out to you that maybe seemingly small but truly get in the way?
Yeah, well, I kind of touched on it there for a second, but so you've got your federal, then your provincial, and then each municipality has different rules and regulations, and you've got each kind of section of that government that needs to do their approval. So once you've gone to, I'm trying to think of a good example in this area, but say you're trying to build in Pickering or Ajax, and each municipality will have different people that you have to deal with, even though they border each other, and they shouldn't have really the same restrictions and regulations. And so you've got to go through the conservation, you've got to go through that each city municipality and get all the things to go through. And it's really just the process itself, because there's so many different people to talk to, different approvals to get, that takes so long. And then you have this huge backup that's going on throughout that process.
Right. And I think it's probably happening at too slow of a pace, I imagine, but you're starting to see some of these places start to maybe address some of these things. But I think I was just listening to a podcast about California, relaxing some environmental rules, and there's stuff here in Toronto where the density changes, but it doesn't seem that these items are necessarily going to fix are sort of moving at the pace to kind of fill that gap that you mentioned in the first part around the shortage.
Yeah, I mean, to change things on a government level, especially when it comes down to each section of government, you can have your premier here in Ontario saying, hey, we want to build homes faster, and they can remove some of the provincial red tape, but that's not helping the municipality section of it. So, there's so many, once again, there's just so many levels to go through to make those changes, that yes, that is a clear answer to how we can build more houses, is to make it a faster process. But it just seems unrealistic that you're going to get it done in every municipality. The other kind of section of what's slowing things down is the cost of building right now. We've seen costs go up considerably. They've risen about 58% since 2020, when we're just talking about construction costs in general. And so, despite the fact that we have this sort of shortage of housing, and despite the fact that that's a Canada-wide problem that everyone knows about, you have a lot of developers that are just kind of sitting and waiting, and they're not building right now, because of that situation. And whether it's interest rates or that level of things that will help the situation, I don't know, but that cost is causing a lot of people to sit on the sidelines of the builder. So
Yeah, it's really multifaceted, right? So you kind of hear or at least I hear the sentiment from clients and so on. Kind of two things. One is my kids will never be able to afford a home, or the other is am I buying this property, or am I investing in this property at the wrong time? And so how should someone sort of see the full picture, as it relates to that?
it's actually something I think about a lot. With I have a couple young children myself, and I wonder if they'll ever be able to afford a home. I have trouble believing that it can continue to just go up, because of that expansion that we've seen, especially here in Canada. And I'm really just touching on Canada right now, because there are different levels to it in the US. And the problem with Canada is the majority of people live in that kind of southern aspect of it that are close to the US. And we have a lot of land that either A, can't be built on, or B, there's no jobs. And so everyone kind of comes to these same areas. You've got this underlying shortage of housing. If that does not go away, then housing prices cannot go down, in that significant of a fashion, just because it's simple supply demand. If you are able to build in the other areas of Canada and expand cities that have jobs and people can actually live out there, then that is a solution to the problem, where you'll see those types of areas have lower cost housing, similar to now transitioning it to the US. We do a lot of business in the state of Texas. The state of Texas is very different than somewhere like Ontario, where the jobs are kind of in the city hub, and everyone tends to come into the city. You've got traffic that, I don't have to explain to anyone in Ontario what that traffic looks like, but you've got everyone coming to the same place and they want to make their commute as easy as possible so they can go to work every day. In somewhere like Dallas, Fort Worth, rather than having a city hub where everyone goes, as they expand and as they build out, they have office parks, and then people live and work and shop and do everything in their little community throughout the growth of the city. They're able to expand it out. We have land restrictions here that are stopping that. But that comes to the main problem of this main Toronto hub and the GTA, that those housing prices are going to continue to go up if all the jobs are here and people are going to have to go into the office. Now, the virtual side of things obviously expanded that for a while. And I don't know what the future is of virtual. We've had big companies saying they want people in the office more. So, once again, I don't have an answer. If I did, I think I'd be elected into the government to be able to solve this problem. But,
Yeah, it sounds like, if I'm kind of even putting together, what you said there, along with what a lot of, maybe urban advocates might call for with more density in cities, so it sounds like either more density or kind of like this hub and spoke approach, and maybe ideally both. And so would you say that those are some of the signals that people could be looking for, you know, to recognize that an area, a region is getting more serious about the housing issue?
yeah, I think it does. It does align. You're bang on with that. The problem is that we just don't have the ability because of land restrictions here. I think if we're looking at something in Canada right now, to us at Trez, we're looking at something in Alberta, and we're saying our thesis continues to be and always has been job growth plus population growth equals opportunity for development. So we've got somewhere like the province of Alberta where they've expanded their jobs outside of just oil and gas, right? Historically, and that's been always people's biggest pushback on the province of Alberta is it's all oil and gas and boom or bust based on that. But you've seen some really big job growth in that province of tech and kind of all different industries. They have a lower cost of housing. They have the available land to expand and kind of grow the city. And so that's where, if we're doing anything in Canada right now, that's where we're doing it. In Ontario, there's concerns about the job situation in Ontario, especially with what's going on with the US and the manufacturing and some of the car manufacturing aspects that are up in the air at this point. And I don't think anyone really knows exactly where they're going to land, but that would cause job losses in Ontario and may negatively impact the real estate market here. So for us, the opportunity continues to be in Alberta right now with that job growth and population growth. Year over year, they are the highest net in migration province in the country.
Interesting. And so, it's kind of, we're almost like building kind of painting a bit of a picture here for, what people might be looking for in a market where there might be some opportunity, some from a government standpoint, changes in rules around land development, maybe density, so on and so forth, but also job growth, population growth, net migration. So you kind of piece all of these things together, and it's probably an opportunity where people might be seeing housing housing starts and so on and so forth, which would likely be more attractive from a pricing perspective.
Absolutely, I think that's what Alberta brings to people, and that's why they're seeing that in migration of people is just people that don't see the opportunity to buy a house here in Ontario or somewhere in BC, and they're getting a lot of people from those provinces. But if I can kind of take that that comment that you made and transfer it to our US side. So the US, similar to Canada, has a supply shortage. and it's a different cause than what we've had in Canada. The Canadian one was caused by immigration, whereas the U.S. Housing shortage was caused by underdevelopment. And basically, if you look at the numbers, in 2008, which at that point people owned 3 homes that had no business owning one, and we all know that they had a huge oversupply of housing, and since that period, since that 2008 period, they underdeveloped for 15 plus years. So what you've seen is in 2014, it flipped from an oversupply to undersupply, and it's never looked back. Right now in the U.S., they're 3.5 million homes short for this year. By 2030, we need 12 million new homes. And to give you a little bit of context on that, the largest home builder in the U.S., D.R. Horton, builds about 90,000 homes a year. And so it's an astronomical number that it's going to take years to come to get through. Now, the benefit is that they don't have the same restrictions and regulations. It is easier to build depending on the states, right? So you mentioned California earlier. California, historically, a difficult state to do business in, a difficult state to build in. There's a lot of red tape, very comparable to something like in Ontario, in how it takes to build something in the state of California. Actually, this is a bit of an offshoot here, but I have a colleague who's actually from the UK, so maybe this is a bit of a biased comment, but he says that California is like France. It's a great place to vacation. You should get your wine from there, but you shouldn't do business there. And so that is a good way to kind of look at what it takes to develop in the US, in California versus somewhere like Texas, where there's less regulation, it's more business friendly, and it's easier to get things permitted and up and running. But then once again, to the comment before of what we're looking for, which is that job growth and population growth, you've got companies and people moving from California into Texas. So Texas continues to be the highest job creation. And I actually had some data come in recently that said they have created the most non-farm jobs since May of 2024. So 213,000 non-farm jobs were created in the state of Texas since May of 2024. And that's the largest out of any state. And they continue to lead the country of new jobs, and their unemployment stays relatively low. So over the past decade, it's been about 2.5 million new jobs. And since 2020, more than 200 companies have moved from other states into Texas, with the majority of them coming from California. So you're looking at one state that's got jobs that are leaving, people that are leaving, and one state that has jobs that are coming, people that are coming. So that kind of opens up to the opportunity for development there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. Like that just maps very well on top of everything we were just talking about with Ontario and Alberta. Like it's different countries, maybe different local issues, but just kind of high level. It's like the same, that formula: job growth, population growth, net migration. It's kind of
it's very similar. It's interesting, and what people will call Alberta the Texas of Canada. It's at a smaller scale, and they don't have the same. Like Alberta is more business friendly, and they have lower taxes, but it's not as much lower as it is California to Texas, right? Texas has no state tax at all, whereas Alberta still does have a provincial tax, but land is cheaper, housing is cheaper, it is more business friendly, so it does map pretty similar.
right. And I guess like my last question for this part is really just kind of what advice you'd give people trying to read through all the noise right now. I mean, I think you've covered. There's a couple of things that have jumped out, to me. If I think of kind of the two things that I had a question of earlier, which was my kids. I'm worried my kids aren't going to be able to buy a home. Well, that seems to, the solve maybe for that is places where there's a lot of development, right, happening because you can get in at good prices. And then the other is, I'm worried about my real estate my, the value of my property. And it's like maybe, can fluctuate, but because of the supply demand dynamic, like there's probably not a lot of downside there. I mean, does that sort of resonate? And is there other things that people should be thinking about as they read through all of the noise?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it as, your personal residence, I think that let's take Ontario as an example. The personal residence within the GTA area, where there's this massive demand for people because that's where the jobs are, and I use GTA very broadly. It's a very expanded area of the GTA, but there are jobs here. It's where people need to live. It's where people want to live. It's almost impossible to build more because of land restrictions. I find it hard to see those the personal residents coming down significantly. What needs to happen is not lower income homes, but more of those townhome type areas that do have a little bit more space, not condos, not things like that, but the townhome areas where people do have a little bit more space and are at a lower price level. Those higher price level homes are, I believe, going to stay in that range. Because there's still that huge demand for those homes. When it comes to your kids, I mean, if someone has an answer for me, I'd love to hear it, but I don't know what's going to be, 20 years from now, what that housing market's going to look like. And I mean, it may be an Alberta move for your children in order to buy homes,
Right.
because that's where, jobs and homes are going to be built. And then when it comes to the investing side of real estate, it's really looking for those themes of where people are moving and where jobs are going to be. And so as a company like Trez, where we see most of the opportunity in the US, it continues to be those Sunbelt states. You get a lot of noise in the media about oversupply that came in, and that this is something we didn't touch on here, but it was a function of the interest rates going to zero during that period. Because there's less regulation, you saw this influx of housing supply that all came to the market at the same time. Now, because of the underlying undersupply, it all was taken out throughout 2024. But in 2024, you had the most multifamily housing deliveries that we've ever seen. Coming into 2025, that fell off a cliff because no one was building from 22 to 23 when rates shot up, and so that development has kind of stalled throughout the U.S. and because of that increase in rates and that cost of borrow. And so we're going to continue to see that supply demand mismatch expand even further. And so that continues to be the area where the opportunity is, because there's people, jobs, there's land, there's not a ton of red tape, and they just have this need for housing that is going to take forever to climb out of.
That's great. And we're definitely going to get into that in a bit more detail. Spencer, really appreciate the high level discussion today. This helped cut through a lot of the noise and gave us a clear understanding of the real forces shaping housing supply in North America. In part two of our conversation, we're going to shift gears and talk more specifically about how these dynamics create opportunity, where Trez is deploying capital right now, as you started speaking to there, what kinds of deals you're funding, and ultimately how investors are making money in this environment. For the audience, if you're curious about that side of the story, how to think about real estate, not just as a policy issue, which is what we spoke about in this first part, but as an investment opportunity, just reach out via the contacts in the description and we'll make sure you get access.